Chapter 254. The arrival of the Dragon Sword young Master Xianxia made the East City Gate more lively. In the East Unicorn continent, everyone below the age of 35 belonged to the younger generation. Currently, there was a group of people with the most terrifying talent and potential in the younger generation. They were the 6 young masters, the 4 fairies, and the 3 king stars. Dragon Sword young Master Xianxia is one of the 6 great young masters. Eternal Spring Valley's Su Muyu was also known as Fairy Muyu. The Celestial Star sect's young master Celestial Star had the title of Young Master Celestial Star. Xiahou Chuan of the Dolin family had the title of Young Master Dolin. Heaven Fiend sect's Yen Qingwu had the title of Fairy Qingwu. This group of people were either 6-star bone frames or heaven-defying 5-star bone frames. Of course, there were some heaven-defying 5-star bone frames that didn't enter. For example, Xiahou Shi of the Dolin family. If a 6-star bone frame would definitely be able to enter, a heaven-defying 5-star bone frame would have to depend on their future performance. In the future, Xiahou Shi should be able to enter, but not now. As for the 3 king stars, they are the 3 supreme existences of the Eastern Lin continent's younger generation. Their status and strength are above the 6 young masters and the 4 great fairies. In the previous stars ranking, these 3 individuals were actually the top 3 with unparalleled strength. It wasn't that the others couldn't compare to them, but the main problem was that those who were older than them couldn't compare to them in terms of talent and potential. Those who had similar talent and potential weren't as old as them, so they weren't strong enough. Li Fuchen's eyes fell on Dragon Sword young Master Xianxia. In the eyes of Li Fuchen, Xianxia, whose qi activity was supreme, had no flaws and was full of sharpness. It seemed that he could instantly attack from any angle. On this point, Lu Yun and Li Xiangru were far from him. As expected of one of the 6 great young masters, young Master Dragon Sword. Li Fuchen silently praised. 2 years ago, he was ranked 28th on the stars ranking. After 2 years, his strength would at least be ranked top 15. Perhaps he has already comprehended the advanced profound rank sword intent. Li Fuchen's intuition told him that there should be plenty of people who comprehended mystic class high-tier sword intents. He didn't know if his comprehension was the best, but in the face of time, unless his comprehension was ridiculously high, there was no way he could make up for the gap of a few years. Young Master Dragon Sword Xianxia, 22 years old this year, Earth Fiend Realm 9th Layer Realm, 2 years older than him, equivalent to 2 more years of cultivation time. Giving a 6-star bone frame 2 years of cultivation time was already an exaggeration. A 6-star bone frame would basically have a huge transformation in a year. Lu Yun and Li Xiangru also sensed the existence of Xianxia. The sword qi emanating from the other party was simply too dense. As a swordsman, he could sense it even with his eyes closed. But at this moment, the 2 of them were like arrows knocked on a bowstring. They would not stop until the victor was decided. Clang, 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 clang. Sparks flew wildly. The battle between the 2 had reached a point of madness. Blood spurted from his body. Li Xiangru was too stable. Even with the existence of Xianxia, his emotions did not fluctuate, but Lu Yun produced a trace of fluctuation, which gave Li Xiangru a chance. The outcome has been decided. Seeing this scene, Li Fuchen secretly breathed a sigh of relief. If it was someone else, Li Fuchen didn't think the outcome was set. However, sword maniac Li Xiangru wasn't an ordinary person. His spirit and willpower were unimaginably tenacious, which could be seen from his sword skills. Once he gained the upper hand, the chances of a comeback were close to 0. 400 moves. 500 moves. The battle between the 2 was exceptionally long, but it was understandable. After all, the 2 of them were similar in all aspects. It was almost impossible to determine the winner in a short period of time. Only in the case of a huge gap in strength could the winner be decided within 1 or 2 moves or a few dozen moves. After 500 moves, Lu Yun had several more cuts on his body, and his qi presence was slightly weaker than before. Li Xiangru's advantage was getting bigger and bigger. It may be because of someone's message, the number of people outside the East City Gate increased several times. Everyone didn't care about the battle between Lin Teng and Qin Yuanhu. But the battle between Lu Yun and Li Xiangru, everyone was still very concerned. What's more, Star List rank 28th, one of the 6 great young masters, young Master Dragon Sword, Chiyuya, also came. Normally, they didn't have the chance to see Chiyuya. This person is young Master Dragon Sword, Chiyuya? Surrounded by everyone, Xiahou came over. He was the first time to see Chiyuya, with a strong battle intent in his eyes, but this battle intent was extremely restrained, and ordinary people couldn't feel it at all. The eyes fell on Chiyuya from time to time, and Xiahou didn't notice Li Fuchen. 6 great young masters, interesting. For himself not being able to enter this group of people, Xiahou is more or less a little unhappy. But he doesn't care. Sooner or later he will get back his glory. If there is a chance, he doesn't mind getting rid of Chiyuya himself. In his eyes, all the geniuses with the potential of king are his prey. Chiyuya is no exception. Chiyuya is not an ordinary person. His perception is sharp and terrible. For the first time, his eyes fell on Xiahou. The eyes of the two inevitably touched. Dolin clan's Xiahou has killing intent to me? Chiyuya's mouth cracked. He is not a kind person. He has always looked down on others. I didn't think that this time I was actually remembered. The sharpness in the eyes is wanton, attacking Xiahou. Xiahou retracted his gaze. Now with Chiyuya, it is very unwise. He will not give the other party this opportunity. More and more people, Su Muyu also came. As one of the 2 6-star root bones of Eternal Spring Valley, Su Muyu has the title of Fairy Muyu, not to mention its own talent potential. Just the appearance is enough to oppress the group. She glanced at Chiyuya and Xiahou, looking indifferent. I don't know why, Li Fuchen's figure appeared in her mind. I don't know if he is here. The intuition of a woman is terrible. I didn't pay attention to Li Fuchen at first, and I didn't think anything, but after everything happened in the tomb, Li Fuchen gave her a very deep impression. Profound and incredible. If the so-called 6 great young master, 4 great fairy and 3 king star are stars in the sky, the other is a huge star hidden in the dark, low-key, introverted, but cannot be ignored. Looking around, suddenly, Su Muyu found the figure of Li Fuchen. Without hesitation, Su Muyu recognized the identity of Li Fuchen at a glance. Hidden in the dark? Su Muyu is very curious. Li Fuchen, long time no see. Su Muyu true spirit sound transmission to Li Fuchen. Li Fuchen said, still can't hide from you. He knows that he can't hide from familiar people. After all, the appearance can be changed, but the aura can't be changed. Are you remembered? Su Muyu asked. Li Fuchen said, there is nothing wrong with doing things carefully, but Mystic Martial Hidden Realm opens, I will reveal my identity. He didn't intend to keep changing his appearance. When Mystic Martial Hidden Realm opens, he will naturally change back to his original appearance. As long as you can become a personal disciple of Mystic Martial Expert, I believe that Heavenly Fiend sect dare not take him. After all, Heavenly Fiend sect has no evidence that he killed Li Wuxia. As for whether he can become a personal disciple of Mystic Martial Expert, this is not in the scope of Li Fuchen's consideration. Chapter 255. 800 moves. 1000 moves. Sword maniac Li Xiangru pierced through Lu Yun's shoulder and won. You're really useless, Lu Yun. You were defeated by someone ranked below you. On the side of the dragon sword young Master Chiyuya, an ugly look, carrying a big sword on his back, the young man laughed. The ugly swordsman, Gongsun, was the number 3 direct disciple of the Sky Dragon Sword sect and was ranked 48th on the stars ranking. His fame was far greater than Lu Yun's. Lu Yun snorted but said nothing. Li Xiangru, your strength isn't bad. I wonder if you can block my sword. The ugly swordsman Gongsun, because of his ugly appearance, was very prideful. He loved to show off his strength even more. He wanted to let others know that although his appearance was not very good, he was top-notch in all other aspects. Now in this situation, Dragon Sword young Master Chiyuya will not lower his identity, but ugly swordsman Gongsun feels that the opportunity cannot be missed. Finishing his sentence, Gongsun didn't wait for Li Xiangru to reply as he pulled his right hand behind his back and instantly pulled out his huge sword. Shortly after, a sword slashed towards Li Xiangru. The dazzling sword chi was like a comet as it struck towards Li Xiangru. 10 sword kill. Li Xiangru released his killer move. Rumble. Li Xiangru flew back and his arm was numb. Actually, he could have dodged, but the other party had said whether or not he could block his sword, so there was no reason for him to dodge. In a head-on clash, he was still quite a bit weaker than Gongsun. After all, Gongsun Yi was the third true disciple of the Sky Dragon Sword sect. The Sky Dragon Sword sect was one of the top forces in the East Unicorn continent and had a total of 5 direct disciples that were ranked on the stars ranking. Moreover, their rankings were not low. Not bad, but it's not worth a second strike. Gongsun Yi laughed and sheathed his sword. Li Xiangru's expression was as usual and he was extremely calm. Just this psychological quality was enough to make Li Fuchen nod silently. In the cultivation of martial arts, talent and potential were important, but willpower and temperament were even more important. Without a good will and temperament, one's innate potential couldn't be fully unleashed. On the other hand, if one's innate potential was slightly inferior, but one's willpower and temperament were excellent, one could instead break through one's own limits and attain greater achievements. Li Xiangru's temperament was the best he had ever seen. With the same innate potential, Li Fuchen guessed that Li Xiangru would be able to go further in the Star Road hidden domain. It seems like your Azure Water sect is rather lucky to have you and also sword maniac, Li Xiangru. Su Muyu nodded in approval and transmitted a message to Li Fuchen. Li Fuchen smiled. Sword maniac Xixiang is a legend in my Azure Water sect. This is my first time meeting him too. Legendary? You will surpass the legend. You flatter me. In terms of temperament, you're not inferior to him. In terms of natural talent and potential, you're obviously above him. Am I wrong? Li Fuchen smiled and didn't say anything. As the victor between the Cloud Creek Sword sect and the Azure Water sect was decided, everyone returned to their respective cities. In the blink of an eye, there were only 3 days left before the opening of the Mystic Martial Hidden Domain. In the courtyard. Black Wind 3 changes. Li Fuchen's body shook and one after another Li Fuchen walked out of his body. In the blink of the eye, there were 3 Li Fuchens standing side by side. I've finally comprehended the true meaning of the Black Wind 3 transformations. Li Fuchen revealed a smile while the other 2 clones vanished. Black Wind 3 transformations, Mystic class, mid-tier light body technique. At the sub-perfection stage, 1 clone could be formed. At the perfection stage, 2 clones could be formed. Including the main body, it would be 3. But at the trance stage and comprehended the Black Wind 3 transformations, there would still be 2 clones, but they would be more realistic. Without a sound or presence, Li Fuchen's figure scuttled out. Due to his extreme speed, the courtyard was filled with his figures. There were 3 figures that were extremely realistic, just like the main body. The Black Wind 3 transformations doesn't just allow me to create clones, its speed is also exceptional. After comprehending this light body technique intent, it has at least doubled my mobility. What was the concept of having twice the mobility? It wasn't exaggerating to say that the current Li Fuchen could easily kill the previous Li Fuchen without any suspense. Of course, the prerequisite was to break the defense. If it was just speed and not enough attack power, it wouldn't be of much use. Once Li Fuchen circulated the Black Wind 100 transformations, he wouldn't be able to circulate the true Inferno technique and would undoubtedly sacrifice a lot of his attack power. No matter what, after comprehending the Black Wind 3 transformations intent, my overall ability has increased by quite a bit. Especially my survivability, it has at least doubled. An exceptional light body technique only had benefits and no disadvantages. If it could break the defense, it would be even more terrifying. 3 days passed by in a flash. 300 miles outside of Green Cloud City, there was a tall mountain. At the peak of the mountain, there was half a palace. It was said to be half a palace, but it wasn't because the palace was in a dilapidated state. On the contrary, the palace was majestic and magnificent, without a trace of damage. But the other half seemed to be in another world. Early in the morning, a large number of figures arrived at the peak of the mountain. Li Fuchen raised his head and saw that above the palace gate, there was a plaque with 4 words, Mystic Martial Hidden Domain. The words were bold and powerful, like a saber, spear, and axe, with a vast and mysterious intent. No wonder it is the Mystic Martial Hidden Domain. Li Fuchen thought to himself. The Mystic Martial Hidden Domain was a half-opened hidden domain. This palace wasn't a product of the origin world, but was constructed in the Mystic Martial Hidden Domain. Every 3 months, the palace gate would open once. After entering, it would take 3 months before one could exit. There were plenty of people arriving at the peak of the mountain. Young Master Dragon Sword, Xianxia. Ugly Swordsman, Gongsun. Fairy Mu, Sumu. Xiaoshi. Swordsman Travel Cloud, Lu Yun. Sword Maniac, Li Xiangru. Sword Tiger, Chen Yuanhu. Emotionless Sword, Shui Feng, Li Fuchen. Just the stars ranking bigwigs were here. There were already more than a dozen of them. The rest of the people added up to more than 500. While the Azure Water sect had 8 of them. The Mystic Martial Hidden Domain is about to open in 15 minutes. I wonder how many people will be able to pass the first Mystic Martial door. It would be great if 1 out of 10 could pass. Is it so difficult? You might not know if you haven't entered before. The 8 Mystic Martial doors aren't meant to increase the difficulty of each door. In fact, there isn't any difference in grades between the 8 doors. It purely depends on whether you are suitable or not and if your innate talent is all-round. Let me put it this way. Those who passed the second Mystic Martial door might not have an innate potential that surpasses the first Mystic Martial door. Perhaps they are suitable, or perhaps their innate talent is just slightly more all-round. That's right. But if one is unable to pass the first Mystic Martial door, he will never be able to enter the Mystic Martial Hidden Domain for the rest of his life. Sigh, if only I was more cautious back then and entered the Mystic Martial Hidden Domain later. Isn't that so? I feel that the current me will definitely be able to pass the first Mystic Martial door. A pity that I don't have the chance anymore. Among the crowd, not everyone was able to enter the Mystic Martial Hidden Domain. There were some who attempted the Mystic Martial Hidden Domain but didn't pass the first Mystic Martial door. They were only here to watch the show and had already lost their chance. Rumble. 15 minutes later, the palace gates suddenly opened. A rainbow radiance shone out from within and illuminated the peak of the mountain. The Mystic Martial Hidden Domain is opening. Everyone held their breaths and didn't even blink. Right at this moment, in the void, an imposing figure gradually formed. It was a figure that was half real and half illusory. Those who have lost their qualifications are not allowed to barge into the Mystic Martial Hidden Domain. Otherwise, they shall be obliterated. The illusory figure spoke indifferently and emotionlessly. Hearing the statement, everyone didn't have any strange reactions. This illusory figure wasn't a mystic martial expert and didn't seem to be a living being. Chapter 256. Interesting. Qiuye stared at the shadow and could feel the power of the shadow. The shadow's body was filled with martial Dao intent and had the power of Heaven Dao. Martial Dao intent that had the power of Heaven Dao was naturally an Earth-class martial Dao intent. As for Heaven-class martial Dao intent, it wasn't possible. Heaven-class martial Dao intent was close to the power of a god. Killing a Reincarnation realm martial artist didn't even require a move. Since the Mystic Martial Hidden Domain has opened, then there is no need for me to disguise myself. Li Fuchen wiped his face and restored his true appearance. This person changed his appearance? Someone noticed Li Fuchen's abnormality and exclaimed, "It's him!" There were plenty of people who recognized Li Fuchen. Half a year ago, Li Fuchen was wanted by the Heaven Fiend sect and there were plenty of cities that had his wanted portrait. This person was wanted by the Heaven Fiend sect. Although it was later withdrawn, but the Heaven Fiend sect wouldn't let him go. I didn't expect him to expose his identity. If I didn't guess wrongly, he wants to become a personal disciple of a mystic martial expert. That way, the Heaven Fiend sect wouldn't dare to touch him. In his dreams. It is so easy to become a personal disciple of a mystic martial expert. There are so many mystic martial experts' personal disciples. I think he is indulging in fantasy and overconfidence. Let's see what he will do after he fails. Perhaps he will be captured by an expert from the Heaven Fiend sect once he comes out. Everyone was sneering. It is Li Fuchen. Young sect patriarch's death is definitely related to him. There were gold-class direct disciples from the Heaven Fiend sect here too. When they heard the discussions, they all looked over. Li Fuchen ignored everyone's eyes and arrived in front of sword maniac Li Xianru and the others. He cupped his fist and said, "Seniors, I am Li Fuchen. I have heard of you." Li Xianru nodded. Chen Yuanhu nodded too. Well done for the 100 Herbs hidden domain. He had heard of Li Fuchen's domination of the 100 Herbs hidden domain. Back then, only sword maniac Li Xianru was able to do it. We meet again. Xue Feng recognized Li Fuchen. He didn't notice Li Fuchen earlier because he didn't care. As long as he had the intention, he would still be able to recognize Li Fuchen even if he changed his appearance. I heard that you defeated Xiao Bai and Ruan Qianxiu. Is that true? Xue Feng inquired. When he passed by the Autumn Rain City, he unintentionally found out that Li Fuchen was in the limelight during the Autumn Rain Tea Party. He defeated the Stars rankers Xiao Bai and Ruan Qianxiu, which gave him a huge shock. Really? Qin Yuanhu's eyes lit up. Xiao Bai and Ruan Qianxiu weren't normal people. Li Fuchen was only at the 5th level of the Earth Realm and was already able to defeat Xiao Bai and Ruan Qianxiu. This ability was enough to move him. Luck. Li Fuchen smiled. Li Xianru sized up Li Fuchen and said, "If there is an opportunity, let's spar." Since the other party was able to defeat Xiao Bai and Ruan Qianxiu, his strength was probably not inferior to Chen Yuanhu's. Most importantly, Li Fuchen was younger than Chen Yuanhu. All right. Li Fuchen nodded. At this time, there was no need for him to be too humble. Sometimes, being too humble was hypocritical and arrogant. You shouldn't have revealed your true appearance at this time. Chen Yuanhu frowned. Li Fuchen said, "If I become a personal disciple under a mystic martial expert, I wonder if the Heaven Fiend sect would dare to touch me?" Of course not. Xue Feng said, even if the Heaven Fiend sect had 3 guts, they wouldn't dare. The rage of a mystic martial expert isn't something a regular sect can withstand. At least the Heaven Fiend sect doesn't have the ability or the confidence. But becoming a personal disciple of a mystic martial expert isn't just a joke. Chen Yuanhu frowned and didn't say anything. He felt that Li Fuchen was too confident. To become a personal disciple of a mystic martial expert, one had to at least pass the 5th mystic martial door. Even if Li Fuchen defeated Xiao Bai and Ruan Qianxiu, it would still be extremely difficult for him to pass the 5th mystic martial door. There were some things that even if one was confident, one shouldn't be too full of confidence. After all, even a 6-star bone frame wouldn't dare to say that he could pass the 5th mystic martial door steadily. If Li Fuchen wasn't a direct disciple of the Azure Water sect, he would have snorted in disdain. Go inform the upper echelons. Tell them that Li Fuchen is here. A few of the Heaven Fiend sect's gold-class direct disciples transmitted their qi. After a few breaths, one of them descended the mountain and rushed towards Green Cloud City. It's him? Xiahou Shi had also recognized Li Fuchen. He was the same as Xue Feng and didn't pay much attention to Li Fuchen's existence. Otherwise, he wouldn't have taken so long to recognize him. After all, looks could be deceiving, but qi presence wasn't. At least for the Earth Realm, there weren't many that could do it. I wonder if he passed the 5th stage in the Star Road hidden domain. This was something that Xiahou Shi was extremely concerned about. If Li Fuchen passed the 5th stage, he would definitely kill Li Fuchen. If there is a chance, I will still have to get rid of him. It should be able to increase my qi luck by quite a bit. Xiahou Shi withdrew his gaze and concealed his murderous intent. Han Feng, who recognized Li Fuchen, had a pale expression on his face. Compared to Xiahou Shi, he had been completely humiliated by Li Fuchen in the Star Road hidden domain. There shouldn't be a need for me to make a move. One of the Heaven Fiend sect's direct disciples has already gone down the mountain to report. Han Feng thought to himself. When Li Fuchen returned to his true appearance, it caused some ripples on the mountain peak. But soon enough, the ripples calmed down and everyone's attention was back on the palace doors. Let's go in. Those who were qualified to enter the mystic martial hidden domain all skimmed into the palace doors. In the blink of the eye, there were only a few figures left on the mountain peak. These people were all those who had lost their qualifications. Sigh, so regretful. Why can't you give us another chance? As long as I can pass the first mystic martial door, I will have the chance to become a right-in disciple of a mystic martial expert. This is an existence that is even stronger than a supreme elder. I was too impatient back then and wanted to strengthen myself as soon as possible. In the end, I got nothing. Looking on helplessly as the others entered the palace doors, the remaining people were filled with regret. If the shadow wasn't standing guard, they would have wanted to barge in. Of course, they were just thinking about it. Even if the shadow wasn't standing guard, they wouldn't dare to barge in. After all, they were just puny Earth Realm martial artists. After entering the palace doors, everyone landed on a long path. This path was like a giant's path, which was a few hundred meters wide and 100 miles long. Every set distance on the path, there would be a stone door that could accommodate a few hundred people. There was a total of 8 of them. Is this the 8 mystic martial doors? Li Fuchen sized up the 8 stone doors and the mountains on both sides of the path with curiosity. The path penetrated through the mountains, and within these mountains, there were 8 main peaks. Each of the main peaks had a cave abode. In the 6 abodes that were closer to the group, 6 figures with different appearances opened their eyes. 3 months is up. I wonder if there are any good saplings this time. A white-haired veteran with deep eyes muttered and promptly closed his eyes. The personal disciple that Lao Si took in previously isn't bad. I hope there will be someone that I like this time. The man with the phoenix eyes let out a faint smile and was rather interested. A graceful and luxuriously dressed middle-aged beauty said, "I only take in female disciples. I wonder if there are any outstanding female disciples this time." The 6 of them would often take in disciples. There were right-in disciples and also personal disciples. Of course, there were very few personal disciples. If one didn't pass the 5th mystic martial door, they wouldn't take them in as a personal disciple. Unless the person was too special and was extremely demonic in some aspects. But if someone could pass the 6th mystic martial door, they would take them in as a personal disciple no matter what. After all, there wouldn't be many who could pass the 6th mystic martial door in an era. It would be a pity to miss it. Chapter 257. As for the last 2 abodes, a preeminent man and a white-haired elder didn't even open their eyes from start to finish. They had never accepted a personal disciple and had only accepted some right-in disciples. It wasn't because they were picky, but there weren't many who met their requirements. Basically, they didn't have much hope. Arriving at the first stone door, everyone stopped. The first mystic martial door is relatively easier. But if one isn't adept at it, it might be the hardest. Everyone didn't have much confidence, including some of the stars rankers. What is there to be afraid of? I don't believe I can't pass it. One of them skimmed into the stone door. Swish. The stone door didn't seem to have any brilliance, but once this person entered, he immediately vanished without a trace. With someone taking the lead, the rest of the people didn't hesitate and skimmed in. Li Fuchen followed suit. In the next moment, he appeared in a spatial zone. This was a space of a swamp. In this world, there was nothing else but the swamp. A test of light body technique? Li Fuchen frowned. He gently landed on the swamp and didn't cause any ripples. It doesn't matter. I will deal with whatever comes my way. This is just the first mystic martial door, there is no need to think too much. Circulating his chi, Li Fuchen sprinted on the swamp. The swamp didn't seem to have an end. Li Fuchen sprinted for 2 hours and still couldn't see the end. Swish, swish, swish. Unknowingly, there were ripples on the swamp. As the ripples undulated, Li Fuchen felt that his speed had obviously slowed down. Furthermore, the stickiness of the swamp was getting stronger. Stopping, Li Fuchen was pushed back a few dozen meters by the ripples. Seems like it is indeed a test of light body technique. Executing the Black Wind 3 clones, Li Fuchen's speed increased drastically. His entire body was like an afterimage as he sprinted on the swamp. At the same time, the others were sprinting on the swamp too. I can't take it anymore. Light body technique is my weakness. Damn it. A youth sprinted on the swamp with a depressed expression. This swamp wasn't an ordinary swamp. It had a powerful stickiness, and every time one tried to borrow strength, it would take a lot of effort to get rid of it. It was fine if it was for a short period of time, but after a long period of time, one would be exhausted. Ah! A young man unwillingly cried out. His entire body was sprawled on the swamp, unable to climb up at all. A great wave of the swamp surged, and this young man disappeared without a trace. Within 2 hours, half of the hundreds of people had been eliminated. Useless. The mystic martial door might seem to be testing one's light body technique, but it is actually testing one's control of one's qi. If one can't even control one's own qi, how can one be qualified to stay in the mystic martial hidden domain? In the cave abode, a skinny and small man sneered. The further they went, the faster the frequency of the ripples became, making them dizzy. Fortunately, it wasn't too strenuous for Li Fuchen. If it was just a light body technique test, he wouldn't have anything to fear. 1 hour later, Li Fuchen finally saw the exit. The exit was above the swamp. Li Fuchen stomped on the swamp and got rid of the sticky force. His figure soared into the sky and skimmed through the exit. In an instant, Li Fuchen was back on the path, and in front of him was the second stone door. Just as Li Fuchen emerged, a figure followed suit. It is the dragon sword young master Xianxia. Seeing Li Fuchen, Xianxia was a little surprised. As one of the 6 young masters, there was basically nothing he wasn't good at. Apart from sword arts, light body technique was also one of his specialties. He originally thought that he was the first to pass the first mystic martial door, but he didn't expect someone to be in front of him. Interesting, he should be going all out. Xianxia didn't care too much. He didn't go all out in the first mystic martial door and didn't need to. With a flash, Xianxia skimmed into the second stone door. Worthy of being young master dragon sword. Li Fuchen praised silently. The first mystic martial door wasn't easy. He executed the Black Wind 3 clones to pass so quickly. He didn't expect young master dragon sword, Xianxia, to not be much slower than him. The two of them passed the first mystic martial door at almost the same time. Immediately after, Li Fuchen skimmed into the second stone door too. In a short moment, Xiahou Shi, Su Muyu, and the others all came out. They looked at each other and skimmed towards the second stone door. In the second stone door, there was a heavy space. In this space, there was only a thick mountain peak. The mountain peak had a steep cliff and it was almost impossible to climb it. Furthermore, the gravity in this space was too strong and it was almost impossible to fly. Walking to the foot of the mountain peak, Li Fuchen realized that at the bottom of the mountain peak, there was a giant closed stone door. It was about 30 meters tall and 20 meters wide. Standing in front of the stone door, there was a heavy qi presence assaulting his face. "Do I have to push open the stone door?" Li Fuchen asked curiously. Pressing on the stone door with both hands, Li Fuchen's qi burst forth and abruptly pushed forward. Rumble. The stone door opened with a rumble and it didn't seem to be very difficult. But after pushing open this stone door, a stone door that was 50 meters tall came into view. This time, Li Fuchen just used the true Inferno technique to revolve his qi and was unable to push open the stone door. After activating the mystical dragon secret technique, Li Fuchen only succeeded. But behind the 50-meter tall stone door, there was another 100-meter tall stone door. Li Fuchen used all his strength and was unable to push it open. Interesting. Li Fuchen drew his black gold sword and slashed at the stone door. Clang. The sword qi dissipated and the stone door was unscathed. As expected, I can only rely on my own strength to push it open and is unable to destroy it. Giving up on the thought of destroying it, Li Fuchen dispersed the mystical dragon secret technique and activated the primary clear hand. The primary clear hand could increase the qi burst power of the hand, and the partial burst power was even above the mystical dragon secret technique. The stone door trembled a little, but it was just a slight tremble. Open for me. With his muscles tensed, Li Fuchen's spirit will was highly concentrated. Exerting strength in both arms, he pushed the stone door again. Rumble. The stone door suddenly opened. So it is like this. Li Fuchen's face flashed with realization. The second mystic martial door wasn't just a test of strength, but also spirit will. When the martial artist's spirit will was highly concentrated, it would be easier to push open the stone door. But the prerequisite was that the strength and spirit will were strong enough. After the 100-meter stone door, there were no other stone doors. Li Fuchen walked out of this space. A dramatic scene happened. When Li Fuchen walked out, Qiuye followed and was one step slower than Li Fuchen. Qiuye was astonished, so was Li Fuchen. Perhaps, the 8 mystic martial doors will automatically adjust the difficulty based on the martial artist's cultivation level. If not, those with high cultivation levels will have too much of an advantage. It doesn't reflect the fairness that the mystic martial hidden domain should have. Li Fuchen thought in his heart. Qiuye's expression turned a little unpleasant. He didn't go all out for the first mystic martial door, but for the second mystic martial door he was considered to have gone all out. Could he have known from the start that he had to use his spirit will to match his strength? Qiuye felt that this was the only reasonable explanation. Not bad. These two individuals aren't bad. They actually passed the second mystic martial door so quickly. From the looks of it, their spirit will is very strong. It shouldn't be a problem for them to pass the fourth mystic martial door. I wonder if they can pass the fifth mystic martial door. Chapter 258. Xiahou Shi and Su Muyu are not much slower than Li Fuchen and Qiuye. In the eyes of the 6 mystic martial experts, these 4 individuals would definitely surpass the 4th mystic martial door. At this time, there were only 20 people left out of the hundreds. The first mystic martial door was still alright. Out of 10 individuals, at least one would be able to pass it. However, at the second mystic martial door, more than half of the people were unable to push open the third stone door. Even if their spirit will was highly concentrated, it still wouldn't work. But the Azure Water sect's luck was heaven-defying. Including Li Fuchen, 4 of them passed the second mystic martial door. These 4 individuals were obviously Li Fuchen, Li Xiangru, Chen Yuanhu, and Xue Feng. Needless to say, Li Xiangru's spirit will was indestructible and had almost no flaws. Chen Yuanhu was extremely warlike. Even though his spirit and willpower wasn't as tenacious as Li Xiangru's, he was courageous enough and had the tendency of getting braver the more he fought. Xue Feng, on the other hand, was calm and unperturbed. One had to know that there were a few stars-ranking bigwigs who couldn't even pass the second mystic martial door. Third mystic martial door. This was a space of flames. The ground was a sea of fire, the sky was a cloud of fire, and countless beasts were running around. It might be a space of flames, but Li Fuchen didn't feel hot, as though it was all an illusion. What does the third mystic martial door test? Standing in the sea of flames, Li Fuchen glanced at the beast-shaped flames, and there was a faint flash of inspiration in his mind. These beast-shaped flames were full of explosive power. Moreover, they did not exist forever. They were constantly disappearing and erupting from the sea of fire and the fire clouds. Explode. That's right, an outburst. It's a test of true qi explosiveness. Li Fuchen's eyes lit up. The so-called explosive power differed from person to person. Some people had thick meridians, so their explosive power was stronger. Some people had high cultivation techniques and secret arts, so their explosive power was stronger. Some people had strong willpower, so their explosive power was also stronger. Explosive power had nothing to do with true qi cultivation. If a first-level Earth Realm martial artist's qi burst strength was 2-folds, then it would be no different from a 9th-level Earth Realm martial artist who had 2-folds of qi burst strength. It mainly depended on how many times the effect of one's true qi explosion. With the thought flashing, Li Fuchen suddenly blasted out a fist. A wolf-shaped flame erupted. This wolf-shaped flame was not formed by true qi, but by the flames in the flame space. It was a concrete manifestation of explosive power. Exchanging his fist for a palm strike, Li Fuchen executed a palm strike. This was the iron-smelting palm. The flames surged, and a leopard-shaped flame rushed out. As expected, Li Fuchen's guess was right. The stronger the explosive power, the different beast-shaped flames would appear. In this way, his explosive power would probably have to reach a certain level before he could leave this fiery space. Activating the primary clear hand, Li Fuchen executed another palm strike. The flames roared, and a ball of tiger-shaped flames erupted. I wonder how explosive his sword technique is. Drawing his black-gold sword, Li Fuchen cleaved. It was obvious that as a swordsman, Li Fuchen's sword art's burst power was superior to his palm art. With a single cleave, a bull-shaped flame sprinted. The chi presence was vigorous and vast, far superior to the tiger-shaped flame. Next was the flaming devil sword art. As soon as he executed the flaming devil sword art, a rhinoceros charged forward in flames. A mystic-level middle-tier killer move was unleashed. A giant python of flames surged out. Activating the black iron sword essence, a flood dragon roared towards the sky, its momentum terrifying. At the same time, a flaming door appeared in front of Li Fuchen. There's no rush. Li Fuchen wasn't in a hurry to leave the fiery space. He took a deep breath and concentrated his spirit will to a high level. In the unseen world, there seemed to be a force being nurtured. A sonorous dragon roar echoed, as a flaming giant dragon that was baring its fangs and brandishing its claws suddenly descended and burst forth violently. At that moment, the entire sea of flames seemed to be in an uproar. What? Explosive power at the dragon class? The mystic martial experts from the 6 abodes were shocked. Generally speaking, once one reached the flood dragon class, they would be able to pass the 3rd mystic martial door. There might not even be one dragon class expert in an era. Flood dragons and dragons might seem to only have a difference of 1 class, but the difference was like a chasm. A flood dragon was ultimately a flood dragon. But a dragon was a species of a higher class. I must take this child in as my personal disciple. No one shall contest with me. A mystic martial expert that was as tall and sturdy as a mountain roared. Old 6, you are not qualified to teach him. I should be the one to do it. The man with the phoenix eyes said. The tall and sturdy man wasn't convinced. I am most proficient in explosive power. Why am I not qualified? The middle-aged beauty said, in explosive power, we aren't inferior to you. Furthermore, you are only proficient in explosive power. What about the others? How are you going to teach him? Stop wasting God's gifts. The tall and sturdy man was still unwilling. I don't care. I must teach him. Producing an incredible personal disciple would be beneficial to them too. He couldn't give up. Don't be willful. Furthermore, it is up to him to choose. I don't think he will choose you. The man with the phoenix eyes didn't argue and laughed. They might be in their respective abodes, but the mystic martial hidden domain was extremely mystical. Furthermore, they were all reincarnation realm martial artists, and it was extremely easy for them to transmit messages across space. The rest of the mystic martial experts didn't say anything, but they were extremely tempted. They decided that when the time came, they would definitely tempt Li Fuchen and make him their personal disciple. After all, if they missed this opportunity, they might not have another chance in the future. This child isn't bad. Right at this moment, the white-haired elder in the 2nd abode spoke. Second brother, you have an idea? The man with the phoenix eyes wasn't calm anymore. Big brother and second brother had yet to accept a personal disciple. Furthermore, the 2 of them were the strongest. If the 2 of them were to participate in the competition, their chances would instantly be reduced by 90%. The white-haired elder spoke indifferently. The prerequisite is for him to pass the 5th mystic martial door. The 5th mystic martial door was the lowest standard. If it was in the past, even if one passed the 6th mystic martial door, he wouldn't normally accept a personal disciple. But Li Fuchen was a little special. After all, burst strength was an extremely important factor in one's strength. The difference between Flood Dragon class and Dragon class was just too huge. It was just like the difference between a normal person and a prodigy, which was unbelievably huge. I hope he doesn't pass the 5th mystic martial door. Subconsciously, apart from the preeminent man, the rest of the 6 mystic martial experts were hoping that Li Fuchen wouldn't pass the 5th mystic martial door. If outsiders were to know of their thoughts, they would probably be dumbfounded. But they didn't care at all. Whether they accepted a personal disciple was up to them. If it wasn't to their liking, so what if you passed the 5th mystic martial door? If they didn't accept you, they wouldn't accept you. But if it was to their liking, even if you only passed the 3rd mystic martial door, they would still accept you as a personal disciple. Of course, the 3rd mystic martial door was considered a lower standard. Even if it was lower, they would still have to consider it carefully. They couldn't possibly accept someone who passed the 1st or 2nd mystic martial door as a personal disciple, right? I am most curious about why he didn't even pass the 4th mystic martial door. The stalwart man had evil thoughts in his mind. Li Fuchen was too much to his liking. He couldn't wait to snatch Li Fuchen over. As for the results, he couldn't be bothered about it. He only intended to accept Li Fuchen as a personal disciple. Li Fuchen didn't know the thoughts of the mystic martial experts. Chapter 259. Explode! In the flame space, Xianxia screamed and slammed his sword forward. A resounding beast roar resounded, and a flood dragon of flames rushed out with majestic momentum. With the emergence of the flame portal, Akabane breathed a sigh of relief. He could feel that the difficulty of passing the 3rd mystic martial door was much higher, and even he wouldn't be able to pass it casually. At the same time, the others were also rushing through the fiery space. Rain and Xiaohou were the first to pass. Following closely was Li Xiangru and Han Feng. Chen Yuanhu and Xue Feng, on the other hand, could only unleash the explosive power of a giant python and left regretfully. As such, out of the 20 over people, there were less than 10 who passed the 3rd mystic martial door. Only 9 people passed. The Azure Water sect had 2 members, Li Fuchen and Li Xiangru. Out of the flame space, Qiyuye did not see Li Fuchen. Still not out. Qiyuye muttered. After waiting in place for a moment and seeing that no one came out, Qiyuye skimmed towards the 4th mystic martial door. The 4th mystic martial door was a world of water. As soon as he entered, Li Fuchen was immediately wrapped in water. Not far away, a big fish swam over. Looking at it up close, he realized that it wasn't a real fish, but a fish made of precious materials. The fish's belly opened up, revealing a control room inside. Entering, closing the fish belly, Li Fuchen looked at the control room. The control room was very simple. Other than a transparent crystal at the front, there was only a rudder. He held the rudder with both hands and turned it slightly. The big fish followed suit. If he pulled it down, the big fish would sink. If he pulled it up, the big fish would rise. Immediately after, Li Fuchen tried to input qi again. The speed of the big fish increased exponentially. It was now more than 10 times faster than before. What will this test be? Li Fuchen didn't understand. If it was a test of the output of true qi, then he would definitely not be as good as someone with a higher cultivation than him. His intuition told him that it had something to do with the rudder. The big fish swam for a while. Suddenly, densely packed black dots appeared in front of it. Upon closer inspection, he realized that these black dots were actually a school of fish. The school of fish was extremely fast and rushed towards Li Fuchen. This is a test of reaction speed and awareness. Li Fuchen instantly understood. Although reaction speed and awareness were related to one's cultivation, the relationship was not particularly large. At the very least, it was not a decisive factor. Of course, if Li Fuchen was just a regular prodigy, he would definitely be at a disadvantage now. After all, he was only at the 5th level of the Earth realm. The increase in his reaction speed and awareness was too little. It was a level lower than the 6th level of the Earth realm, a huge difference from the 7th level of the Earth realm, and a level lower than the 8th and 9th level of the Earth realm. For the 4th mystic martial door, one's cultivation had to be at least at the 7th level of the Earth realm. The 4th mystic martial door tests reaction speed and awareness. I wonder if he can pass it easily. Being at the 5th level of the Earth realm is too much of a disadvantage. But with his ability, it shouldn't be a problem. It is just a little pathetic. The 6 mystic martial experts were all paying attention to Li Fuchen. The others were just paying attention to it in passing. But soon, the 6 of them realized that they were wrong. Their eyes gradually widened, and they had an incredulous look on their faces. Li Fuchen's reaction speed and awareness were too terrifying. That overwhelming school of fish was densely packed and impenetrable. If a regular prodigy encountered such a situation, their mind would definitely go blank and be dumbfounded. Only the formidable prodigies would be able to calm down and do their best to dodge. But Li Fuchen was able to control the big fish to the limits. Under his control, the entire big fish was able to find a gap and slip in smoothly. Seeing Li Fuchen controlling the big fish was simply a form of enjoyment. When the 6 of them placed their attention on the others who entered the space of water, they instantly noticed the disparity. Seeing these people controlling the big fish from the start to the end, they were all on tenterhooks, afraid that they might be bumped by the school of fish. It was the complete opposite of Li Fuchen. How can his awareness be so strong? The eyes of the man with the phoenix eyes were bursting with a horrifying radiance. He could naturally see that Li Fuchen's reaction speed was secondary. The crucial point was that Li Fuchen's awareness was too terrifying, allowing him to instantly understand what to do. Horrific, too horrific. Even a heaven realm martial artist wouldn't have such a strong awareness, right? After the stalwart and sturdy man recovered from the shock, his face revealed a sorrowful expression. He admitted that he wasn't qualified to teach Li Fuchen. Li Fuchen being in his hands was a complete waste of talent. Only boss and second brother can teach him. The stalwart and sturdy man thought to himself. The preeminent man and the white-haired elder were very well-rounded and didn't have any shortcomings, while the 6 of them more or less had some shortcomings. This child is an anomaly. As compared to his awareness, strength burst is nothing. The middle-aged beauty covered her forehead. Awareness was her forte, but boss and second brother were much stronger than her. The crucial point was that she wasn't able to teach strength burst. The big fish passed through the school of fish and a water portal appeared in front. Walking out of the big fish, Li Fuchen skimmed into the water portal. Outside of the mystic martial hidden domain, someone passed the 4th mystic martial door, but it actually isn't young Master Dragon Sword, Xianxia. It is this person named Li Fuchen. On the left pillar of the palace gate, there were 8 stone door shadows. Everyone clearly saw Li Fuchen drilling out from the 4th stone door shadow and skimming into the 5th stone door shadow. For a moment, everyone was in an uproar. Who was young Master Dragon Sword, Xianxia? He was one of the East Unicorn Continent's 6 young masters. He had supreme innate talents and was known to have monarch-class potential, while Li Fuchen was at most a rising star. In everyone's opinion, even if someone was faster than young Master Dragon Sword, it should be Fairy Muyu, Su Muyu, or Xiahou Shi who had the heaven-defying 5-star bone frame. It shouldn't be Li Fuchen. We have misjudged. This person's innate potential is actually so formidable. Everyone's face was burning. Previously, they mocked Li Fuchen for overestimating himself and being overconfident. Reality gave them a ruthless slap in the face. Let's see. He might not be able to pass the 5th mystic martial door. It isn't like this hasn't happened before. He passed the first 4 doors very quickly, but got stuck at the 5th mystic martial door. Some were still unconvinced. Damn it, he actually passed the 4th mystic martial door. The Heaven Fiend sect's gold-class direct disciple had an awful expression. The more mystic martial doors Li Fuchen passed, the more likely it was for him to be accepted as a personal disciple by a mystic martial expert. They were already in a dangerous situation. Once Li Fuchen became a personal disciple of a mystic martial expert, the Heaven Fiend sect would have to think thrice before making a move on him. Killing Li Fuchen was a small matter, but offending a mystic martial expert was a huge matter. Who knew if the mystic martial expert would go crazy and cause a huge ruckus in the Heaven Fiend sect, killing a few Reincarnation realm martial artists? After entering the 5th mystic martial door, what appeared in front of Li Fuchen was a world of thunder and lightning. The sky was filled with thunder clouds and lightning bolts descended from the sky, intertwining like a net. Li Fuchen didn't move forward and carefully observed the space of thunder and lightning. These thunderbolts seemed to be martial arts. After observing for a long time, Li Fuchen came up with a shocking conclusion. Every bolt of lightning was like a martial artist executing an ultimate move. Some ultimate moves were slow, some were fast, some were ever-changing, and some were incomparably fierce. At this moment, the white-haired elder in the second abode opened his eyes and began to observe Li Fuchen. Chapter 260. It should be a test of martial arts. With this thought, Li Fuchen drew his black gold sword and executed the blaze devil sword art. But there was no reaction. Is the martial arts not exquisite enough? Li Fuchen executed his kill move. There was still no reaction. Why don't I attract a bolt of lightning? Li Fuchen cleaved at one of the lightning bolts. Crackle! The lightning bolt was successfully attracted and instantly struck Li Fuchen. Li Fuchen's mind was filled with martial arts essences. I see. Opening his eyes, Li Fuchen was slightly shocked. This bolt of lightning actually contained martial arts essences. Using the martial arts essences to create my own moves? Li Fuchen guessed. Li Fuchen started to study the martial arts essences. This bolt of lightning contained a leg art essence. After obtaining these leg art essences, Li Fuchen could feel that his leg art proficiency had improved significantly. It was almost at the level of a sword art. It should be a higher class leg art essence. Li Fuchen felt that it was good to stay here for a longer period of time. Obtaining a leg art essence was different from cultivating a leg art manual. The former would be injected directly into the brain, while the latter would require time to cultivate. After studying for a moment, Li Fuchen started to create a leg art move. Boom! A kick was executed and a chi explosion could be heard. Boom 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 boom. Like a thunderclap, Li Fuchen kicked a few hundred times in a single breath. Each kick was stronger and more exquisite than the last. Towards the end, it wasn't inferior to a mystic class low-tier leg art and was starting to produce leg art intent. But it still didn't cause any abnormalities. Li Fuchen wasn't discouraged and continued to study. After an unknown period of time, Li Fuchen's legs began to produce electric sparks. His kicking speed was like lightning, inconceivably fast and ferocious. If it was a regular prodigy, they wouldn't even be able to see the trajectory of the kick and would only be able to see a burst of lightning. 1 hour later, a bolt of lightning emerged from Li Fuchen's legs and resonated with the lightning in the sky. At the same moment, a door of lightning appeared in front of Li Fuchen. As expected, as long as I use the martial arts essences to create a mystic class mid-tier martial art, I will be able to leave the space of lightning. I wonder if I can continue to attract the lightning. Li Fuchen cleaved at the lightning in the sky again. But this time, there was no reaction from the lightning. Looks like one person can only attract one lightning bolt. I can't be greedy. With such thoughts in mind, Li Fuchen stepped into the thunder door. This child's comprehension is superb. I'll take him in, the white-haired old man said word by word. The man with the phoenix eyes was unwilling to give up. Second brother, can you give him to me? The white-haired old man smiled and said, Third brother, you already have a personal disciple. Why are you still fighting with me? The man with the phoenix eyes said, At most, I'll exchange my personal disciple with you. The white-haired old man said, Do you think I'm a fool? I don't care about your personal disciple. Second brother, if he chooses me, you can't stand in his way, the man with phoenix eyes continued. The white-haired old man said, What do you mean by obstructing others? But don't worry, if he still chooses you after knowing our background, I won't fight with you. He believed that this possibility was almost impossible. Who would choose the third mystic martial artist and give up on the second mystic martial artist? Unless they were stupid. All of you stop fighting. I want him, said the pretty-looking man. Big brother, you fancy him too? The white-haired old man wasn't calm anymore. The pretty-looking man was the #1 mystic martial artist and also their big brother. In fact, they weren't sworn brothers and weren't blood-related brothers. But because they were all mystic martial artists, they addressed each other as brothers. The white-haired old man's age wasn't that old, he just looked old. Of course, he was actually older than the pretty-looking man, But the pretty-looking man was stronger, hence, he could only be the number 2. The pretty-looking man said, "I have a few right-in disciples. Only he is qualified to be my personal disciple. How can I miss this opportunity?" As the number 1 mystic martial artist, it was too difficult for him to accept a personal disciple. It wasn't that he didn't want to, but these people were too inferior. After all, it was beneficial for them to produce formidable personal disciples. Apart from him and his second brother, the rest of them already had personal disciples. The white-haired old man said helplessly, "It isn't easy to accept a personal disciple." Lao San couldn't compete with him. Similarly, he couldn't compete with Big Brother, unless Li Fuchen was really stupid. Second brother, wait a little longer. Before the Stars ranking tournament, you will definitely be able to accept a personal disciple. According to my estimations, this era should be the strongest era after the disappearance of the absolute experts. You still have a high chance of accepting a personal disciple. The preeminent man consoled. The white-haired old man nodded. I hope so. He also felt that there was something special about this era. Otherwise, they would not have appeared here. Outside the mystic martial hidden domain. Past the 5th mystic martial door. To be able to pass the 5th mystic martial door, there is at least a 90% chance of becoming a personal disciple of a mystic martial expert. TSK. Everyone was shocked. As for the Heaven Fiend sect's gold-class direct disciple, his face was ashen. Li Fuchen becoming a mystic martial expert direct disciple is in the bag. In the future, their Heavenly Fiend sect will no longer be able to deal with Li Fuchen, unless someone in the younger generation of Heavenly Fiend sect can kill Li Fuchen. The mystic martial artists had once said that they would not intervene in the sparring between the same generation, but only forbade the older generation from intervening. Do not think that you can hide from a mystic martial artist. It might be hard for a mystic martial artist to investigate the truth, but the shadow that was guarding the mystic martial hidden domain could. There were rumors that the shadow that was guarding the mystic martial hidden domain was the spirit of the mystic martial hidden domain. It had all sorts of mysterious powers, and if a mystic martial expert paid a price, the spirit of the mystic martial hidden domain could investigate the truth. Otherwise, when a personal disciple of a mystic martial expert was killed, the culprit wouldn't be exposed so quickly. After all, the East Unicorn continent was huge and there were countless experts. Who would know who was the killer? Swish, 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 swish. A few figures descended from the sky and they were all Heaven Realm martial artists. Are you sure he is in the mystic martial hidden domain? A Heaven Realm martial artist asked a gold-class direct disciple from the Heaven Fiend sect. This gold-class direct disciple replied bitterly, "Elder, this person has already passed the 5th mystic martial door. I am afraid he will become a personal disciple of a mystic martial expert." What? He passed the 5th mystic martial door? These Heaven Realm martial artists were all inner sect elders of the Heaven Fiend sect. When they heard the news, they were all flabbergasted. They knew that Li Fuchen's innate potential was high, but they didn't expect it to be this high. Those who passed the 5th mystic martial door were all elite prodigies of the continent. They were either 6-star bone frames or heaven-defying 5-star bone frames. But Li Fuchen was just a 1-star bone frame. Damn it, why is his potential so high? We cannot let this matter rest like this. The sect patriarch said to capture Li Fuchen at all costs. That's right, capture him. Mystic martial experts are unable to casually leave the mystic martial hidden domain. Every time they leave, they will have to pay a huge price. We are just capturing him. Once we capture him back, we will let the sect patriarch make the decision. These people didn't want to return empty-handed. In their opinion, as long as they didn't kill Li Fuchen, there shouldn't be any problems. As for what the sect patriarch would decide, they weren't able to fathom it. Maybe he would let him go. Maybe he would kill him out of anger. Chapter 261. When Li Fuchen passed the 5th mystic martial door, 5 people were still in the lightning space. They were Qi Yuye, Rain Su, Xiahou Shi, Han Feng and Li Xianxia. As for the others, they all failed. After a long time, Qi Yuye, Rain, and Xiaohou passed the fifth mystic martial door one after another. Han Feng and Li Xiangru weren't able to create a mystic-class mid-tier martial art within the stipulated time. Hence, they stopped at the fourth mystic martial door. Qi Yuye, Su Muyu, and Xiaohou have all passed. Including Li Fuchen, there are a total of 4 individuals who passed the fifth mystic martial door, creating a new record. Last time, only Xiahou Chuan passed. This time, it's 4 times. This is too exaggerated. Apart from Li Fuchen with their innate talents, it is actually possible for them to pass the fifth mystic martial door. I wonder if they can pass the sixth mystic martial door. I don't think that's possible. As of now, only 3 individuals have passed the sixth mystic martial door. That's right. Among the 3 king stars, only 2 of them passed the sixth mystic martial door. The other one didn't even pass. The sixth mystic martial door is extremely difficult. Let's wait and see. In the outside world, everyone was discussing fervently. The sixth mystic martial door was a space of wind blades. Between heaven and earth, there were wind blades everywhere. The bigger ones were dozens of miles long, while the smaller ones were the size of a cow's hair. A wind blade slashed at Li Fuchen's shoulder, causing a wound to appear. "You can hurt me?" Li Fuchen was shocked. The first 5 spaces were all illusions and didn't possess any killing power. In the 6th space, the wind blades could hurt people, and they were only slightly smaller ones. If they were a bit bigger, they would be able to cut him in half. Li Fuchen was a little confused as he didn't know what the 6th mystic martial door was testing. It wasn't realistic to test his defense. With so many wind blades, even if he was a Heavenly Dipper realm martial artist, he wouldn't be able to withstand it. Puff, puff, puff. With a gust of wind, Li Fuchen's body was left with hundreds of wounds. Some of the wounds had penetrated Li Fuchen's body and fresh blood was flowing out. Taking out a mystic-class shield, Li Fuchen blocked in front of him. Kacha! The mystic-grade shield broke and turned into powder. The power of the wind blades was unbelievably great, and it seemed to be even more lethal to objects other than the human body. Li Fuchen shook his head. He could only rely on himself for the 6th mystic martial door and couldn't borrow any external help. An arm flew up. Li Fuchen's left arm was severed at the shoulder by a wind blade that was a few meters long. With a pale face, Li Fuchen kept dodging. Between heaven and earth, there was wind and wind blades everywhere. The wind could condense into wind blades at any moment. Even if Li Fuchen had heaven-defying awareness, it was impossible to dodge all the wind blade attacks. This time, his right leg was severed. In the second abode, the white-haired elder said, "The 6th mystic martial door is a test of unyielding willpower. Whether he can pass it or not will depend on his comprehension." The man with phoenix eyes in the 3rd cave abode said, "There are strong and weak spirit wills. This trial not only tests one's spirit will, but it also tests one's most primal will when facing death." His will fluctuated greatly. Some people with strong willpower would still be afraid when faced with true fear. Some people with weak willpower might burst forth with a terrifying primordial will before they died. The 6th mystic martial door was extremely mysterious. It was fair and unfair at the same time. In general, those with strong willpower would have a higher possibility of passing. But it wasn't absolute. The path of the martial Tao is to go against the heavens. It is all about defying the heavens. Whoever has a strong will to defy the heavens will be able to pass the 6th mystic martial door. In the first abode, the preeminent man hit the nail on the head. The rest of the mystic martial experts nodded. With his 4 limbs severed, Li Fuchen's head was dizzy and he didn't have the strength to dodge the wind blades. The space of wind blades was an illusion, but he couldn't differentiate if it was real or fake, because everything was too realistic. The current him only had one obsession in his heart, which was to persevere. He didn't know what he had to persevere for, but he knew to persevere. Just like how he didn't give up on himself when he lost his talent. If he had given up on himself back then, he might not have encountered the golden amulet. At the same time, Qiyuya arrived at the space of wind blades too. PFFF. There were 2 more bloody mouths on his body, and Qiyuya was shocked. What is the 6th mystic martial door testing? Qi Yuye was a little flustered. As the violent wind swept over, Qi Yuye's legs were severed at the base, causing him to groan in pain. It was too realistic and there wasn't a single bit of falsehood. I am the monarch of swords, how can I yield? A wind blade that was over a dozen meters in size swept over while Qi Yuye roared with rage. Crackle! Qi Yuye was severed at the waist and looked extremely miserable. Immediately after, Su Muyu and Xiahou Shi arrived at the space of wind blades too. The two of them encountered the same situation. As compared to Xiahou Shi, Su Muyu was much better. Xiahou Shi had always liked to reduce the danger to the minimum and wasn't adept at dealing with such situations. He was feeling anxious and worried about his gains and losses. His subconscious told him that everything was a test. But his body told him that everything was real. Damn it, what kind of test is this? Xiahou Shi's eyes were red. If others can do it, so can I. Su Muyu's thoughts were much simpler. If no one could pass the sixth mystic martial door, she might not be so persistent. But someone had already passed the sixth mystic martial door. Since others could pass the sixth mystic martial door, she didn't believe that she would be inferior to others. In the second abode, the white-haired elder shook his head and laughed. The test isn't this simple. It isn't enough to just rely on perseverance. If the body is shattered and the willpower is blurred, how many people can persist? Just like what Big Brother said, one must have the heart to defy the heavens. The man with the phoenix eyes nodded. Li Fuchen's body was shattered into scraps and his willpower was completely blurred. In a trance, he felt as though he had turned into the wind and became a part of the space of wind blades. He no longer had his own thoughts and could only drift with the flow. Float and float. Blow and blow. It felt as though an instant had passed and as though an eternity had passed. His willpower was getting more and more blurred. The instant his body was shattered, Xiahou Shi was frightened and felt despair. But in the next moment his body reformed and he was teleported out of the sixth mystic martial door. I failed one. The white-haired elder shook his head. This one is actually not bad. Why don't I accept it? A mystic martial expert that was ranked towards the back said, if one could pass the fifth mystic martial door, they would basically accept them as a personal disciple. After all, personal disciples were hard to come by and they couldn't be picky. With so many personal disciples, there would definitely be one or two that were promising. Only Big Brother and Second Brother would rather have nothing than a substandard disciple, because their requirements were too high. From the start to the end, Su Muyu didn't feel despair, but her willpower had also dissipated. Her heart to defy the heavens was ultimately not strong enough. Furthermore, she was too young and was around the same age as Li Fuchen. She didn't have enough experience. If she had a few more years, she might be able to pass the sixth mystic martial door. Su Muyu had also failed, but she was chosen by the third mystic martial expert, the man with the phoenix eyes. As the third mystic martial expert, the number of personal disciples the man with the phoenix eyes accepted were very few. It was very rare for him to be chosen by her. Chapter 262. This kid is not bad. The white-haired old man is interested in Qiyuya. Not bad indeed. The handsome man nodded. You're not going to fight with me again, are you? The white-haired old man was no longer calm. The preeminent man said, don't worry, I won't snatch it from you. He's still some distance away from my standards. That's true. The white-haired elder nodded. In fact, Qi Yuye was still a distance away from his standard and could barely be his personal disciple. Of course, the premise was that the other party could pass the sixth mystic martial door, otherwise, everything would be empty talk. The middle-aged beauty said, the sixth mystic martial door requires one to maintain their willpower for a period of time. As long as one passes this period of time, they would be able to pass it. I wonder if these two would be able to pass it. Although the hope of Li Fuchen becoming her personal disciple is very small, but the mystic martial experts cherish geniuses very much. The former should be possible, but the latter is probably a little dangerous, another odd martial artist with grizzled hair said and analyzed. Time passed bit by bit, but the two of them maintained their will and did not dissipate. Especially on Li Fuchen's side, not only did his willpower not dissipate, it even had the tendency to condense. What a terrifying will! The white-haired elder was moved. Within the wind blade space, it was already extremely difficult to maintain one's will and not dissipate. One simply did not have the strength to condense one's will. At the very least, they had never seen anyone who could do it. But Li Fuchen did it. This meant he still had strength to spare. The will grew stronger and stronger. The wind seemed to have quietened down a little. Does he want to rely on his own strength to recover? All the odd martial artists were shocked. The preeminent man was also staring at Li Fuchen's space of wind blades. Enduring the time limit and relying on one's own strength to recover were two different concepts. It was just like the difference between unleashing the explosive power of a flood dragon and unleashing the explosive power of a dragon in the flame space. No, the difference was 10 times greater than that. One's spirit and will could be tempered. However, there was no way to train primitive willpower, at least not for mystic martial artists. He could only rely on himself. He could only rely on the guidance of fate. Big brother, can you give it to me? The white-haired old man was extremely tempted. Teaching such a personal disciple was something that gave him a sense of accomplishment. Dream on, the pretty-looking man said. With a single point as the center, the wind within a large area stopped. Yes, the wind had stopped. No more wind blades were produced. A spot of radiance was blooming. Is this kid going to defy the heavens? The middle-aged woman murmured. He's already defying the heavens. The burly man's heart ached. Compared to him, the previous direct disciples were too weak. The white-haired old man shook his head. He was the fourth mystic martial expert, but he looked old. The disciple he had accepted previously was Xia Chuan, a disciple of the Dolin clan. On the other side, Qiuye's will is very condensed. There is no trace of dissipation, but there is no trace of condensation. He was holding on. As the top sword Dao prodigy of the East Unicorn continent, he vowed to ascend to the pinnacle of the sword Dao and become the monarch of the sword. Hoo-hoo-hoo-hoo. The wind blades shuttled back and forth, crazily cutting at his will. He felt like he couldn't hold on any longer. But he was unwilling. His goal was to become the successor disciple of the first or second mystic martial expert and do what others couldn't. This was his mission. Hang in there. His will, which had dissipated a little, was like a candle flame, trying its best to hold on. I will use my life to defy heaven's will, condense for me. When the radiance illuminated the surroundings, Li Fuchen's voice suddenly echoed. The next moment, with the radiance as the center, the shattered body began to reform. In just a short moment, a complete body was formed. Opening his eyes, Li Fuchen saw the space of wind blades again. But this time, the space of wind blades didn't have any more wind blades. Where he looked, the wind blades in the distance were all dissipating, as though they couldn't withstand his gaze. The space of wind blades was also a space of willpower. As long as your willpower was strong enough, the wind blades wouldn't dare to be rash. He succeeded? Apart from the preeminent man, the rest of the 7 mystic martial experts took in a cold breath. What kind of person was he? He just had to persevere for a period of time and he would be able to pass the 6th mystic martial door. But he surpassed this rule and recovered by himself, breaking the restrictions of the space of wind blades. Producing a dragon-class burst strength and relying on his primordial willpower to recover his body. Is such a prodigy really a prodigy that grew up in the East Unicorn continent? The white-haired old man was bewildered. The preeminent man spoke with a stern expression. He is an anomaly. But I do not agree with your statement. The East Unicorn continent might be small, but it isn't impossible to produce a heaven-defying prodigy. A true dragon might appear in such a small place. They, the mystic martial experts, weren't reincarnation realm martial artists, but existences that surpassed the reincarnation realm. But they were restricted by the rules of the mystic martial hidden domain and were unable to leave the mystic martial hidden domain without permission. Even if they paid the price to leave, their strength would be suppressed to an extremely low level, and they would only be able to exhibit the combat strength of a reincarnation realm martial artist. Hence, their horizons were much broader than everyone in the East Unicorn continent. But a prodigy like Li Fuchen was truly beyond their imagination. Appear! Li Fuchen pointed to the front and a lump of wind gathered, turning into a whirlwind door. Taking a step forward, Li Fuchen walked into the whirlwind door. The outside world was in a complete frenzy. He passed the 6th mystic martial door. Is he still human? In this era, only 3 individuals have passed the 6th mystic martial door. He actually passed it too. Everyone's emotions were fluctuating. Passing the 6th mystic martial door was a huge matter. If the previous Li Fuchen was unknown, then right now, his fame would spread throughout the entire East Unicorn continent as time elapsed. There would definitely be a place for him in the Stars ranking tournament 1 year later. Li Fuchen passing the 6th mystic martial door was naturally the most unhappy group from the Heaven Fiend sect. The more mystic martial doors Li Fuchen passed, the higher the price the Heaven Fiend sect had to pay if they wanted to touch him. If it was before, they were still lucky that Li Fuchen wasn't able to become a personal disciple of a mystic martial expert. But now, there wasn't a single bit of luck left. After passing the 6th mystic martial door, one would definitely become a personal disciple of a mystic martial expert. This was the iron rule. On the main path, the 7th stone door appeared in front of Li Fuchen. The preeminent man suddenly shouted, "May I request for you to seal the 7th and 8th stone doors?" He felt that Li Fuchen had hopes of passing the 7th mystic martial door. But once the news of Li Fuchen passing the 7th mystic martial door got out, it would only be detrimental to him. For their own benefits, some of the sects would still take the risk out of desperation. What's more, the East Unicorn continent still had a few formidable reincarnation realm martial artists. If they could walk out of the mystic martial hidden domain without paying any price, they naturally wouldn't be afraid. But after paying the price, they didn't have the confidence to win. In short, it wasn't good to be too low profile, but it wasn't good to be too high profile either. He didn't wish for Li Fuchen to encounter any mishaps outside. The shadow that was guarding the mystic martial hidden domains seemed to have heard the preeminent man's voice. With a wave of his right hand, the 7th and 8th stone doors on the stone pillar on the left of the palace gate vanished. What is going on? Everyone didn't understand. Chapter 263. Without any hesitation, Li Fuchen's figure flashed and skimmed into the 7th stone door. The 7th stone door was called the Door of Earth. Each of the 8 mystic martial doors had a name. The first stone door was called the Door of Lake, the second stone door was called the Door of Mountain, followed by the Door of Fire, Door of Water, Door of Thunder, Door of Wind, Door of Earth, and Door of Heaven. The Door of Earth and Door of Heaven were also known as the Door of Heaven and Earth. Since ancient times, only a few individuals could pass through them. The space of the Door of Earth was a space of earth. Standing in this space of earth, Li Fuchen could feel a boundless energy enveloping him. His body gradually turned stiff and his thoughts started to turn unclear. In the blink of the eye, Li Fuchen's body was covered in stone and turned into a stone man, as though he had been through a lot of hardships. Inside the 8 abodes, the 8 mystic martial experts couldn't see the scene inside the Door of Earth. The 8 mystic martial doors might be called the 8 mystic martial doors, but in fact, they could only see the 6th mystic martial door. The Door of Earth and Door of Heaven were places that they couldn't step foot into, and were also places that other prodigies couldn't step foot into. The previous 3 prodigies that passed the 6th mystic martial door only relied on time to pass the 6th mystic martial door, hence, they didn't have the qualifications to enter the 7th mystic martial door. Perhaps after countless years, only Li Fuchen had the qualifications to enter the Door of Earth. I wonder what he will experience inside the Door of Earth? The white-haired elder asked curiously. The preeminent man said, "The 8 mystic martial doors are formed by imitating the 8 Dao doors. The Dao doors are related to the secrets of heaven and earth, especially the Door of Heaven and Earth, which is the beginning of heaven and earth. The 8 mystic martial doors might only be an imitation and don't even have a tiny bit of the essence, but it is still not to be underestimated. The Door of Earth will probably have some strange happenings and the fated opportunities within are not something we can pry into." Dao Door, an existence of legends. It was said that if anyone could see the existence of the Dao Door, they wouldn't be far from becoming a legend. Of course, legends were just legends and no one knew if the Dao Door really existed. The moment he turned into a stone man, Li Fuchen felt his thoughts freezing. In an instant he couldn't think or feel anymore. It was useless no matter how strong his spirit will was. Because the 8 mystic martial doors, the door of earth, involved a trace of the secrets of heaven and earth and wasn't something that the previous 6 stone doors could compare with. What Li Fuchen didn't know was that the moment he turned into a stone man, patterns started to extend on his body. These patterns looked a little like a tool pattern, and also a little like the circulation route of a cultivation technique. The speed at which the veined pattern spread was very slow. It took a full hour before they covered his entire body. In an instant, a heavy and majestic qi presence was emitted. It felt as though the stone man that Li Fuchen had turned into was heavier than a mountain and had a qi presence that was more vigorous than a lake. The entire space was centered around Li Fuchen. Li Fuchen didn't know what was happening to his body, but the golden amulet obviously knew. It slowly revolved, allowing the patterns to be carved into Li Fuchen's body. As time passed, the stone man gradually became modeled. Wind blade space. When the time came, Qiuye's body began to condense. Opening his eyes, Qiuye exudes indescribable domineering and arrogance. He had passed the 6th mystic martial door. This means that he is not weaker than the 3 king stars. In terms of innate potential, he stands at the top of the eastern Lin continent. I should be the 4th to pass the 6th mystic martial door. A little over a year's time is sufficient for me to reach the pinnacle and compete with the 3 king stars. Qiuye's lips curled up as a smile of supremacy appeared on his face. A whirlwind door appeared and Qiuye stepped into it. When he reappeared, Qiuye had shifted out of the main path and appeared on a giant plaza. On the plaza, as long as one passed the 1st mystic martial door and above, they were all there and waiting. Qiuye is out. No wonder he is young Master Dragon Sword. From the looks of it, he seems to have passed the 6th mystic martial door. Incredible. Xiaoshi passed the 5th mystic martial door and was accepted as a personal disciple by the 4th mystic martial expert. Qiuye will at least be accepted as a personal disciple by the 3rd mystic martial expert. There is even hope for the 2nd mystic martial expert to take a liking to him. This time, Su Muyu and Xiaoshi also passed the 5th mystic martial door. I wonder which mystic martial expert will take a liking to the 2 of them. Seeing Qiuye, everyone was very envious. As compared to the Qiuye trio, they could only try their luck. If they had good luck, they might be accepted as a personal disciple. If they had ordinary luck, they could only become a right-in disciple. If they had bad luck, they shouldn't even think about becoming a right-in disciple. With results below the 4th mystic martial door, the mystic martial experts were very capricious in taking in right-in disciples. Some of them passed the 3rd mystic martial door and they didn't take a liking to them. Some of them only passed the 1st mystic martial door but were taken a liking to them. It seemed like it depended on their performance in a certain door. Did he pass the 6th mystic martial door? Su Muyu and Xiaoshi looked at Qiuye. After experiencing the space of wind blades, the 2 of them knew the difficulty of passing the 6th mystic martial door. Young Master Dragon Sword, Qiuye passing the 6th mystic martial door was more or less out of their expectations. With a faint smile on his face, Qiuye stood still and his eyes were brimming with vigor. Where is he? Qiuye swept a glance around and didn't find Li Fuchen. When venturing into the mystic martial hidden domain, as long as one passed the 1st mystic martial door, they would be able to stay temporarily. It was obvious that Li Fuchen wouldn't be expelled from the mystic martial hidden domain. Not out yet. Qiuye frowned. He already knew that as long as he persisted in the 6th mystic martial door for a period of time, he would be able to pass the 6th mystic martial door. According to the time, Li Fuchen was definitely in the space of wind blades inside the 6th mystic martial door. 1 hour later, Qiuye's expression was a little unpleasant. The longer the time, the higher the possibility of Li Fuchen passing the 6th mystic martial door. It was enough for him to pass the sixth mystic martial door alone, and there wasn't a need for a second person. Especially when Li Fuchen was also a swordsman. 2 hours later, Qiuye's expression was gloomy like water. He was arrogant and didn't even put those people who were ranked in front of him on the stars ranking in his eyes. Only the 3 king stars could arouse his battle intent. In the space of the door of earth, crackle. The stone man that Li Fuchen turned into had a crack. Immediately after, there was a second crack, a third crack. In just a short moment, the surface of the stone man was covered in cracks. Fine stone shards were falling off and dissipating into nothingness. When the last piece of stone shard fell, Li Fuchen opened his eyes. What happened? Li Fuchen was very curious. In the space of the sixth mystic martial door's wind blades, he was still conscious. But in the space of the seventh mystic martial door's earth, he didn't have any consciousness at all. It was as though his entire body had sunk into the deepest level of sleep. Lowering his head, Li Fuchen suddenly realized that the surface of his palm had faint patterns. Removing the clothes in front of his chest, there were also patterns on his chest. These patterns? Li Fuchen was shocked. From the patterns, he could feel traces of tool pattern, and at the same time, there was also the scent of the cultivation technique circulation route. Could it be an Earth-class body refinement technique? Earth-class body refinement techniques were very mystical. Li Fuchen had seen it in the records. There were some body refinement techniques that could forge the fleshly body like a weapon. It was indestructible and had boundless strength. At the same time, it could also give birth to body refinement intent. Welcome to Legends of Cultivation audiobooks, where we bring ancient fantasy to life through storytelling. Follow the rise of heroes who defy fate, unlock mystical powers, and battle across celestial realms. Our audiobooks are crafted for fans of Chinese cultivation novels, filled with battles, breakthroughs, and legendary artifacts. Subscribe and be part of an unforgettable journey into the realm of immortality.